All right, folks. So Donald Trump made some time in his speech, and by some time I mean about 15 seconds, for bragging about his restoration of free speech to America. So here it is.
And I have stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back.
There you go. Yeah, beautiful job. So this is back from January where he talks a little bit more about this. Trump, the free speech president, tells Davos elite that the U.S. government will no longer participate in censorship operations against the American people.
I'm pleased to report that America is also a free nation once again. On day one, I signed an executive order to stop all government censorship. No longer will our government label the speech of our own citizens as misinformation or disinformation, which are the favorite words of censors and those who wish to stop the free exchange of ideas and, frankly, progress. We have saved free speech in America, and we've saved it strongly.
We've saved it strongly. Yes.
Bigly.
Saved it bigly. And very strongly. Well, it's funny because the speech was March 4th at 9 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. that same day, he announced this. All federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No masks. Thank you for your attention to this matter. No masks, of course, referring to the fact that a lot of these students hide their faces when they are out protesting. So FIRE, a free speech organization, responds with a pretty good thread here. Free speech on college campuses is a proud American tradition and on public campuses protected by the First Amendment. President Trump's message this morning, combined with other recent executive orders threatening punishment for protected speech, is deeply chilling. So, yeah, that public-private distinction is important because, you know, when you talk about federal funding, people say, well, should government funding be going to this? Well, if it's a public school, then obviously it relies on government funding. So you're basically saying we're going to shut down any public school that upholds the First Amendment. So there's very explicitly an infringement on the First Amendment. Two things are true. FIRE continues. One, peaceful protest isn't illegal, and the government must follow the First Amendment. Government schools, obviously, because they're federally funded, must follow the First Amendment as well. Misconduct or criminality, like true threats, vandalism, or discriminatory harassment, properly defined, isn't free speech and must be punished. The president can't force institutions to expel students. Students are entitled to due process on public campuses and, almost universally, on private ones too. As FIRE knows too well from our work defending student and faculty rights under the Obama and Biden administrations, threatening schools with the loss of federal funding will result in a crackdown on lawful speech. Schools will censor first and ask questions later. Today's message will cast an impermissible chill on student protests about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, paired with President Trump's 2019 executive order adopting an unconstitutional definition of anti-Semitism and his January order threatening to deport international students for engaging in protected expression. Students will rationally fear punishment for wholly protected political speech. The First Amendment protects controversial political speech. We don't use the law to punish dissenters. Instead, as a nation, we have chosen a different course to protect even hurtful speech on public issues to ensure that we do not stifle public debate. If a college violates anti-discrimination laws like Title VI or Title IX, the government may ultimately deny the institution federal funding by taking it to federal court or via notice to Congress and an administrative hearing. It is not simply a discretionary decision that the president can make. Okay, so as we'll see, we have kind of a B part to this segment that I might clip separately depending on how long we run here. But Columbia University is actually invoking language in the Civil Rights Act to classify anti-Zionist speech as discriminatory harassment. So that is where under that interpretation of the law, these fascists might be able to argue before a court that someone participating in pro-Palestine protests is guilty of discriminatory harassment. Now, that is, of course, an outrageous argument, but that is an argument they can make. But, as Fire points out, they still have to make that to a court. They can't just say, you kick these students out or we're cutting you off. Like, even in that perverse interpretation of civil rights law, and even in that sort of really, really just sick interpretation of what is and is not protected speech, you still have to go through a process. Even if you want to make the argument, you still have to argue it before a judge. Likewise, students who engage in misconduct must still receive due process, whether through a campus or criminal tribunal. This requires fair, consistent application of existing law or policy in a manner that respects student rights. President Trump needs to stand by his past promise to be a champion for free expression. That means for all views, including those his administration dislikes. And speaking of his administration, here's Elise Stefanik, who is now the ambassador to the United Nations. The reason she is ambassador to the United Nations, oddly enough, is because she put a lot of feathers in her cap by cracking down on pro-Palestine speech on college campuses. She was the one who really ran the show against those 3 Ivy League presidents who were all eventually, I would say, forced/nudged into their resignation. Under President Donald Trump, colleges and universities will be held accountable. Anti-Semitism and anti-Israel hate will not be tolerated on American campuses. Promises made, promises kept. Once again, all this broke the same day he made the following statement in this speech.
And I have stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back.
Now, look, I don't like to
You
language.
can misgender whoever you
Yeah, right,
want.
exactly. I don't like to get bogged down in semantics and language police. As someone who probably speaks 10,000-15,000 words into a microphone every week, I don't like to nitpick when people use certain words. But I have to just say it is important in this context because I've heard from a lot of people that Israel is a blind spot of the right when it comes to free speech. No, there is no blind spot. If you have it, you either believe in a principle or you don't. The very principle of free speech assumes you have no blind spots because what free speech means as a principle is that absent direct threats, you are allowed to express any opinion that you want. So if Donald Trump has a blind spot on this issue, what that means is that Donald Trump is against free speech. Anyone with a blind spot is not for free speech. You can't call it a blind spot. It's not a blind spot. It is in direct violation of their supposed opinion. If he wants to say he's for free speech, then he can't have fired off that tweet. And it's not just a tweet. Obviously, they signed executive orders. He says in the other video there, I signed orders on day 1 protecting speech. You also signed executive orders cracking down on campus protests. Yeah.
Right. J.D. Vance went to Europe and gave a very covered speech about the Digital Services Act there, which, of course, is horrible and we're against. We've done segments about it. Did not say one word about the crackdowns on pro-Palestine protesters and speech. Not a single word about it. Now, Michael Tracy tweeted out something. He's very right. He said, hey, they emphatically made it clear they don't believe in free speech before you voted for them.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a betrayal of what they said. And we said that. It was one of the reasons we were never really considering endorsing. But among many reasons, we pointed out, look, they're saying Israel is not prioritized enough.
Right.
They're saying, like, why would we support these people? Lee Fong, this is kind of another track of this, which we might cover Sunday. Lee Fong just dropped a great article showing how these people like Mark Andreessen and these other tech people basically glommed onto the free speech movement to deregulate their industries. They're trying to get, and very successfully with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, all these people who are exercised about speech to think that, not wanting a guy like Andreessen to just set up dodgy financial instruments with no regulation, that's somehow woke. None of these people believe in free speech. They're using these movements like the truckers, like the online free speech movement. They're using that to push an oligarchic Zionist agenda. They do not believe in free speech when it impinges on their freedom of action.
Please clap.